Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is a sustainability panel discussion. My name is Tom Outram, and I'm the General Manager of the Sustainable Wine Roundtable. And I'm delighted to be joined by 4 industry experts, including one special guest. Barclays joined us at short notice, so thank you for being part of this session. Today we're going to be discussing how bulk wine can create both business and sustainability opportunity. And I'm just going to turn to the panel for some brief introductions. Johan, can you kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Thank you for inviting me today. Yes, my name is Johan, and I'm the Nordic Sustainability Director at the Hans Just Group. And we are distributors of wine and spirits in the Nordics, so Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. We are approximately 250 people and distributing half and half wine and spirit. And I joined in 1.5 years ago in this company. It's actually one of the oldest companies in the Nordics, more than 160 years old. And the family is still in business, and they, I think it's very rooted in their DNA to think about responsibility. So right now we are on a very exciting journey to investigate how we as a distributor are really trying to change the industry and see how we can help with the sustainability agenda. Also worth noticing is that we are operating monopoly markets. I'll come back to that because that's very interesting when we talk about bulk as one of the technologies we are looking into. So, yeah.
Great.
Hello, my name is Barclay Webster. I work with Free Flow Wines. Free Flow is the only reusable package with national availability in the United States in the wine business. We work with more than 150 different wineries, importers, and almost every single distributor in the U.S. To make their wines or help make their wines available in reusable steel kegs.
Does this work? Yeah, there we go. Hi, my name's Barry Dick. I'm the global sourcing and sustainability manager for bulk wines at Waitrose supermarkets in the UK. We're, I guess, a premium retailer. We count for about 6% of the wine market in the UK. It's like a cooperative model. It's partnership owned as a business. Some really lovely kind of aims as a business to make the world a happier place. So sustainability is kind of at the heart of the ethics and values of Waitrose as a business. But I think I can probably talk also generally about, what it's like to be a retailer and where the opportunities are for bulk and how it fits into the current, I think, business thinking and program really.
Hi everybody, I'm Simon Mason. I'm Head of Wine and Sustainability at the Wine Society in the UK. We also have a slightly alternative ownership model. We're a mutual society. We were founded in 1874. So all of our customers are in fact our members, and our members are our only customers. We've got 190,000 active members at the moment, so it's a model that works very well for us. It does mean that we can work a little bit more longer term. We don't have quite the same commercial pressures on the business as perhaps some of the kind of the supermarkets or high street retailers do. It means we can list around 4,500 to 5,000 different products a year, and we work with over 900 growers, predominantly in Europe, but with 26 countries sort of represented globally.
Great, thank you all. Just before we dive into the topic, I'm just going to give a short introduction to the SWR. For those that don't know us, we're a global membership organisation. We provide our members with an independent, multi-stakeholder platform for collaboration. And we enable our members to share knowledge and work together on different sustainability issues. And we deliver practical outputs in the form of tools, best practice, and guidance for the industry. We do this through a number of means, through working groups, through research projects, through education and training, and conferences and events like these. Who's involved? Well, we've now got over 100 members around the world, including more than 12 retailers. We have more than 250 industry experts, so those are people who sort of take part on behalf of their organizations. And we operate or have coverage in over 25 different countries. Here's just a selection of the number of members that we have involved. As you can see, it's diverse, from Pernod Ricard winemakers to Ahold Delhaize in the Netherlands, to M&S, Lidl, Treasury Wine Estates, but also universities such as Geisenheim University. Just to sort of touch on our approach to sustainability, as some of you may know, historically, the main focus of industry standards has been on what happens in a vineyard and winery. Our approach is to look at the full value chain. So everything from what happens in the vineyard to the production in the winery, to packaging, to the distribution, to retail. One of the key projects underway at the Roundtable is the development of a global reference framework for sustainability. And this is seeking to address the current misalignment between the more than 40 different industry standards that operate locally and regionally. And the aim is to try and create a global definition for sustainability. Not necessarily a standard or certification, but a framework for understanding how different standards compare, but also a sort of process towards leveling up and giving us, as an industry, a better definition for sustainability. I mentioned we have a number of projects underway. You may have seen in the press that we recently launched, just last month, the SWR Bottle Weight Accord. And this is an agreement which is based on evidence-based research, which we carried out over the past year. And it's taken the form of an accord between more than 11 retailers who are involved in the Roundtable, which seeks to reduce the average bottle weight of still wines from 550 grams to 420 grams by the end of 2026. And we've got a number of supporting sort of structures in place to deliver this accord. But if you're interested to find out more, please check out our website. We have the recording of the launch. We're pleased to have Jancis Robinson involved, who's been talking about this issue for a long time. So this is sort of an example of where collective action based on evidence can deliver real meaningful outputs. Now that's enough talking from me. As you can see, we do have a bit of Damien unfortunately can't join us today due to commitments back home, but as I say, we're pleased to have Barclay with us. So now I can turn to the panel just to get started with this session. Barry, perhaps you can kick us off with your perspective on this topic and your experience. I know you've been both researching through your Masters of Wine program and also now you're obviously leading the charge at Waitrose. Perhaps you can just give us sort of the context of the session today.
Yeah, I think I can start with a really good example about why Waitrose asked me to join the team. As some of you might know in the room, Waitrose would be, a very quality-focused retailer, and I think there would have been, I'm probably speaking for some of my team here, but a little bit of prejudice against things like bulk shipment and UK bottling for quite a while. So one of the key things that has happened is that prejudice around quality, around moving wine in bulk and bottling it somewhere else has disappeared. I think there's almost universal acceptance that can be done in a really, in a great way technically. So that prejudice has subsided, and then you're left looking at the whole thing from does this increase, commercial value? And importantly, the Waitrose team looked at it and went, moving wine around in bulk shipment, given the efficiencies, is one of the best ways that we've got to improve our carbon footprint. So that led them to, bringing me into the team and really looking at their range to figure out how we can do more bulk shipment. And that was simply driven from a motivation around decreasing the carbon footprint, which is really interesting. And there'll be many other retailers around the world, I think, kind of looking at the same situation. And I think in the context as well of retail, we've got probably three key types of wine and product that we sell. We've got own label, which is increasing in many retailers around the world to add differentiation. You've also got private label, and then you've got branded, examples of those I'm sure many of you can point to, like Jacob's Creek and Concha, and those take up a key part. And that segmentation is shared, so say it's a third in some retailers, which means that the retailers are in charge of, 2/3, a lot of it own label and their own private brands in some of those big retail organizations. At the same time, you've got consolidation of producers around what they do, and they're specializing in different things. So, that's really forced an organization amongst the industry to think about whether they're selling bulk wine or whether they're a branded organization. And I think there's definitely been, a separation and a specialization in the industry on those things. And then you've got consolidation of production as well. So all of that has really driven us to a point where bulk shipment is a very key part of the industry. It's accepted as, acceptable from a quality point of view, and this, great incentive around decarbonisation of, wine, a wine range at a supermarket. So I think that kind of sets up a great discussion about how we do it better, what gets done, and the role that it plays, in the industry. And if you look at some countries like Australia, the vast majority of the volume that they sell is shipped in bulk and bottled elsewhere. So I think that's kind of where we're at, and that has happened in quite a, I've been involved in bulk shipment, as Tom said. I wrote my MW dissertation on a key part of it, but in 20 years, I've seen it radically change to being, as I say, the position we're in today, which is it's a key part of what we all do.
That's a great introduction. Thanks, Barry. Simon, the Wine Society are relatively new to bulk wine. I know you've been sort of leading on the sort of exploration of it as a sort of part of your portfolio. Can you just tell us about that sort of process and perhaps sort of the challenges you faced in this?
Sure. I think it's worth saying just to start with, though, that whilst we are new to what might be classed kind of modern bulk shipping, we actually our earliest wines were bulk ship wines from Europe. So we were founded on sort of barrels of Portuguese and French wine coming to the Wine Society and UK bottled. And as recently as 1992, we actually had our own bottling line in our premises. So there's no such thing as new ideas. There's just a different context for the same ideas, I think. And it's just very interesting how kind of consumer expectations and preferences have changed over the decades. But it's fair to say that we are currently for us, bulk makes up quite a small proportion of our sales mix. So it's currently only a couple of percent. If you look at the wines that we sell in volume, you get to about number 40 before you see anything from sort of deep sea shipped, with everything above that coming from Europe. So I think the focus primarily up till recently has been on kind of the gains that can be made from deep sea, and it's more recently that perhaps people are looking more and more at the opportunities around bulk shipping within Europe. For us, it is all about the sustainability and the carbon reduction benefits. So we undertook a very kind of detailed carbon reduction plan in 2022. And we set ourselves the target of being carbon net zero across all three scopes. So that includes sort of shipping and producers by 2040. So very, very ambitious. And if we are to get anywhere close to that, we're going to need to make some quite significant changes around the way we ship wine and the way we package wine. And it's very clear that there's no one measure that's going to get us the whole way there. So it's all about little percentage differences that are going to start to stack up and build into a quite considerable change. So as far as we're concerned, we see bulk as one of those measures that can make a difference for us. And we're currently in the process of trying to identify which producers we can work with who will be able to move from shipping at site to UK packing. If we move that across, it'll mean we obviously are moving more bulk in smaller volumes. It'll mean less trucks on the road. That makes a saving. It'll mean potentially we can pack into lightest weight, highest recycled content glass in the UK. It will mean we can pack into alternate lower carbon formats, such as bag-in-box or recycled PET bottles, both of which we've been trialling this year. And by the time we stack up all of these measures, we'll hopefully have taken a big chunk out of those Scope 3 carbon emissions. So it's I think it's one measure in what will be quite a broad portfolio of steps that we'll need to take.
Beyond sort of environmental benefits, are there other savings or benefits that you can see with an increased sort of bulk wine share?
I think for us, it really is it's the carbon reductions that's the driver. But it must be said that there is the potential, I think, for some financial savings as well. And as we see challenges around price points in the UK, driven by kind of duty increases and cost of dry goods, which has sort of fluctuated quite significantly, but certainly haven't gone back down to the levels of a couple of years ago. We do see that there's some opportunity to maintain price points for a little bit longer if we were to move some wines to bulk shipping. That said, we are very, very conscious that we have these long-term relationships with our producers, with our suppliers, and we're absolutely determined that they shouldn't be penalised unduly by any of these changes that we're making. We want to stay working with these people for sort of decades to come. So it's a consideration, but primarily it is the sustainability benefits that we see as the driver.
But is the sort of resistance possibly from your suppliers to using bulk, is that a potential barrier for bulk wine's growth? Or?
I think it's something that we're going to have to manage on a case-by-case basis. We've done some quite small-scale trials in the last year. So we've shipped wines in IBC, so 1,000-litre containers, from several of our producers in France and in Austria, which we've then packed in the UK under a couple of alternate formats. And in those cases, there was more resistance, I think, to the formats than the shipping itself. So I think it's manageable. But we know that there are going to be some challenges around, producer sort of control and the sort of the winemaker's natural desire, I think, to kind of hang on to control till the last possible minute. And of course, we've got issues in some areas where we've got big selling wines where the appellation might not currently permit sort of bulk shipping or other formats as well. So I think these are challenges we'll need to work through as we go.
The sort of shared experiences we faced with the bottle weight reduction also, I think there's some overlaps there.
Exactly. There is a lot of tradition stroke inertia in lots of parts of the wine world that I think it's an interesting challenge that we'll need to face, but I think we've made some quite encouraging starts, and I think once the momentum picks up, it will really bring into light those regions who are perhaps not quite as accommodating at the moment, let's say. Certainly with something like bottle weights, where there is no real reason why bottles need to be above a certain weight. So, we'll work through these challenges. It's a good job we're starting now, I think, if we're going to hit 2040.
Yeah. Johan, can I turn to you for a different perspective? What role is bulk wine taking in Hans Just Group?
That's a good question, because I think we are just starting to look into it. And why are we doing that? We see in our part of the world that there is a very rapidly growing interest in reduction emissions. And not only for your own operations, but of course the ecosystem that you are part of. You might have heard of the new reporting directive from the EU, CSRD, that is making companies accountable on a whole new level to show what are the emissions in the value chain that you are part of. So our customers comes to us and start, starting to investigate how is their ecosystem emissions looking like, and then asking us, so what can we do about it? And I think we are at that stage where we are looking into all kind of options and opportunities. And I think definitely there's a huge opportunity with bulk shipping from logistics, from local tapping. We are also in a place of the world where there's a lot of renewable energy, making the tapping and bottling process much more have a much more lower emissions. So in that sense, we're looking into the math at the moment, and we have business cases between 20 up to 40% reduction of emissions in the bottling process and in the international transport. So there's definitely a win to it. But the reason why I came here today is because I believe sustainability is not a one-man show. It's something we need to do together. It's a systemic problem we have, and we are really in a problem. Yesterday, the UN came out with a new report saying that we are now on a path to 1.9 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels in 2100. And that have significant influence on wine growing areas. We know that already. So that is also why we have this very high on the agenda. As I said, our company is more than 150 years old. We are now in the transition between fifth and sixth generations, and we hopefully have many generations to come. And I think that's what drives us, is the notion that there is no business on a dead planet, basically. So we are looking into it. We're very open for it, but we also have long traditions of working together with our brand owners previously. What I'm very encouraged by is everyone wants to get on board on this. People are very curious about this. And I think learning from a historical perspective, we had digitalization 20 years ago. We were looking at that computer and say, what can we use that for? And now our iPhones have more computer processing power than the Apollo missions rocket had. The fun thing is that we use it to watch kitty videos, but that's another thing. But I think that what we're entering now is a complete transformation of the society and also the wine industry, and we haven't really figured out how to do it. So in a way, we are flying the plane as we build it.
You mentioned in your introduction that you work very closely with the Nordic monopolies. What are the sort of conversations you're having with them around this topic?
Yes, it's very important for us, the monopolies. So monopolies are government owned, and we're operating Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And all governments of Norway, Sweden, and Finland have ratified the Paris Agreement, basically meaning that the monopoly needs to set science-based targets, more or less meaning that they need to find a pathway to reduce their emission aligned with the Paris Agreement. Not only for their own operations. I think it's easy to change a light bulb or find a different way of heating your store, but they are also accountable for the entire value chain. So they are looking into now ambitious programs with over 50% reduction of their scope 3, meaning everything they don't have control of. So they are very, very, I wouldn't say desperate, but eager to find reductions. And again, bulk here is definitely an option to give them the reduction that they need, because it's ratified by the government.
And would you say that that's sort of the main driver for changes, what's being sort of mandated by the retailers, or are there other drivers that you sort of would consider?
I think now, in general, there's a tendency to have climate funnel side, where everything is really about finding emissions reductions in your Excel sheet. I really want us also to maybe sometimes just come out of that and look more holistically, because how are we impacting biodiversity? How are we impacting the social side? So we are constantly trying to assist all kind of how we're affecting all kind of the sustainability agenda. But for now, the main driver is to find these emission reductions. And I think, at least in the Nordics, we definitely have the feel that we are in a climate crisis or climate chaos, as some told me the other day. So that is by far the main driver for the monopolies, I would say.
Okay. Barclay, can I turn to you for, I suppose, another different perspective? Can you tell us a bit more about Free Flow Wines and what you're doing in this space?
Yes. So basically, over 90% of the wine and the kegs that we produce is shipped to us in bulk. So wineries ship us their bulk in either flexi tanks, or we do prefer the reusable steel tanks, but we also receive spacecrafts, especially from Europe. And we have two facilities. One's in New Jersey on the East Coast, and one, a much bigger one, is in Sonoma, California, in wine country there. And we have long-term bulk storage as well at both of the facilities, which really works for us as a company who uses reusable packaging. We don't want to keg everything for an entire year all at once. We like to try to get at least 2 turns out of our kegs a year. So we don't want to put the whole year's worth of inventory in keg right off the bat. So we keg 2 to 3 months worth of inventory at a time, and keep I mean, not all the time, but that's generally how we try to do it. And we have bulk, long-term bulk storage on site, which also comes in handy at times when you're looking for, we can also do some blending there, make some minor adjustments to the wine, and private labels are extremely easy with kegs because all you really have is a keg collar on top. It's a printed piece of paper, and you can turn that wine into something else really easily. And if you have long-term bulk storage on site, you can blend, you can change the wine for the customer, and ultimately, create a new product for them to seize an opportunity you wouldn't have had otherwise. And we're of course big on the sustainability, but we do approach things. I meet with a lot of the restaurants and the hotels, and as high up on the ticket as sustainability has risen, I still lead with the profitability from the restaurant or the on-trade's perspective. They're pouring out anywhere between 10 to 20% of their wines by the glass that they're offering, just pouring it down the drain because it's been open too long. And sure, they sell it for the price usually of what they're paying for that bottle, so they don't lose money, but they're not making money. And the problem with that is it makes us very uncompetitive versus spirits and beer, and ultimately is why we keep on seeing shorter and shorter wine lists in the U.S., I think. So, that's a little more about us and why I think there's a lot of opportunity with bulk. And honestly, like our motto in a lot of ways is to think outside the bottle and just kind of open people's eyes to what's possible when you don't trap yourself in that little capsule.
Thanks, Barclay. How have you seen sort of the perception of quality change over the time that you've been kind of working with keg and with cans?
Yeah, so there were some failed experiments with wine on tap in the 90s in the U.S. that, with the boomer generation, kind of left some bad impressions on keg wine or wine on tap, and we've been steadily fighting against that. We started in 2009 and did a lot of research into why those experiments failed, and we worked with draft equipment technology companies and really zeroed in on what was the problems with the initial one, and there were a few of them, but one of the major ones was the grade of steel that they were using on the draft equipment traditionally was just not suitable for wine. It's low pH level, so you get a sulfuric note from basically a copper plating that's in low grade steel. Fortunately, when that innovation happened, and Micromatic deserves a lot of credit, they're the world's biggest draft equipment company, and they're based in Germany. They helped us do this research, and there was we also found out that it was best to use a blended gas. Actually, it's the gas used for Guinness for Guinness beer. It's 75% nitrogen and 25% CO2. And in the previous attempts at wine on tap, they were just using pure nitrogen. And what happens, wine does have naturally occurring CO2 in it. And when you're dispensing from a keg, it is beneficial to replenish that nitrogen, that CO2. So that 25% CO2 that's in the gas blend that we use, it's widely available because everybody loves Guinness, and it just helps preserve the wine even into the at least 3 months is what we guarantee it'll stay fresh for on tap. It's honestly a lot longer, but again, we want our kegs back, so we don't like people sitting on them for years. So we do tell it's a minimum 3 months that the keg will stay fresh. And and innovations like that, I think it was what really set Free Flow up for becoming the premium wine on tap, and really creating partnerships with amazing wineries that have been with us for decades, like Tablets Creek in Paso Robles, and we work with Ken Wright in Willamette Valley, who's these are real pinnacle producers of their regions, and for them, they've gone out and had their wines poured to them at restaurants that are just oxidized, makes them look bad, infuriates them really, and this is for them. This is their way of making sure that their wines taste exactly the way that they intended. So I better better stop talking.
No, it's fascinating. We're now halfway through the session. I just wanted to turn to the audience to see if there's any questions for the panel based on what you've heard so far. There's obviously a lot of content that you've listened to so far. Any questions? We will have some more time at the end, so no pressure. Oh yeah, okay, great. Thanks.
What sort of assessment are you doing with the producers? Are there credentials you feel they are serious, minimum standards, or is it even a bit more with the that you already expect from producers?
Yeah, look, it's, as I say, I think because of the, there's quite a few producers who specialize now in bulk and they're getting really good at it. And what does really good mean? They know how to prepare a wine for the journey from A to B. Sometimes that journey's 4 weeks, sometimes it's as long as 8 weeks. So, producers understand that they're preparing a wine for a journey. They're not preparing a wine for the consumer. So that's a really important distinction to make as a winemaker, what you're trying to do. And if you go into a site that does this day in, day out, they've often got a dedicated area that's well away from the winery, so you're minimizing cross-contamination from yeast and bacteria and all the other fun stuff that you get in the winery. So there's physical separation, and then you've got a separation of equipment. You've got dedicated pumps and lines and filters, and they're really serious about doing this really, really well. Other things that I would look at, obviously quality and price come into it as usual. But you would want to see, for me as a supermarket, we would want to make sure that that was a technically competent site. So I would ask for things like HACCP and a quality management system, IFS, BRC, ideally. So as I say, companies that do this really well are very good at it, and they understand what is required on the market side. Does that answer the question?
I think we got a thumbs up there. Simon, maybe we could just turn to you. You've been doing a lot of work on alternative formats. I think it might be helpful for the audience just to be able to sort of learn what you're doing. We've learned what you're doing in bulk, but also outside of more generally is the packaging area.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So, as I alluded to earlier, we see these sort of the whole packaging and shipping as a set of measures that are going to get us towards our reduction. So this year we've been trialing 2 alternate formats. So we've put some of our best-selling wines, including our top-selling wine, White Burgundy, into 2 alternate formats, so bag-in-box and the recycled PET flat bottle from Pacamama. So one of them is obviously a bit more established, bag-in-box, and one of them's a lot more kind of novel, I suppose. And the idea there really was to put these wines, which are well known to our members, to our customers, in front of them in different formats to allow them to assess the quality across the 3 different formats, and also to assess how the size and the shape and the physical properties worked for them as part of their lifestyle, essentially. So we've been trialing that this year. In each case, the wines, as I mentioned, were shipped in IBCs to the UK and were packed in the UK. So quite small-scale trials, but the results so far have been very, very encouraging. Sales of the bag-in-box were phenomenal. They really surprised us quickly, so how quickly that sold. So to the extent we went out of stock, but sort of replenished relatively quickly. And we have already decided that we're going to maintain those lines and expand the range of own label bag-in-box next year from the 6 that we trialed up to potentially about 12 or 18 products. Again, some of our biggest selling lines. And we see that as a real opportunity to make a quantifiable difference in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. That's really going to make a material difference quite quickly. The PET bottle also was quite well received by our members. We're actually surveying our membership at the moment to get a really kind of in-depth view on the format and how that worked for them. But certainly in terms of the quality, we've been very happy. The shelf life so far has been absolutely where we want it to be. And the feedback from the sort of member reviews on our website on the products has been really good as well. So that's very encouraging. We need to do a little bit more work just to work out how we scale that model up at the moment, because we're at a sort of, in terms of our size, we're at a slightly difficult kind of position. So we're not as big as the supermarkets. We can't necessarily commission full tankers, full containers of wine, and we obviously can't keep shipping 1,000-litre IBCs. So we need something in between. So it's working out how we find some partners who can work in that kind of 8,000-litre type volume across a kind of a decent range of premium wines. So that's kind of where we're at. It's quite an exciting time at the moment, but I've genuinely been very positively surprised by the response from our members to both, and it looks like it's going to continue and build, which is very encouraging.
Yeah, that's really, really encouraging. Johan, in the Nordics, I think alternative formats is something that has been in the marketplace for a long time. What do you see as sort of the key drivers for improving sustainability in the Nordics, with the agenda being already well established? What do you think are the sort of new trends and things on the horizon that we need to be aware of?
It's a hard one. I think what we're trying to do now is to change the world very, very fast, and especially when we talk about the end consumer and how they are also part of this. I think now we're talking about PET, for instance, bag-in-box. Bag-in-box have been very well established in the Nordic monopolies for a long time. In Denmark, which is an open market where we didn't have that pressure, bag-in-box is still seen as a discount thing. But in the Nordic monopoly markets, where this has been for a while, we actually see it's being more premium perceived now. I think producers are starting to play around with the format. You have much more graphic surface to play with. I saw one that was like fitting in like into a bookshelf, like with books. It was very, very fun made. So I think, again, we're testing the different kind of concept. I think definitely we are in a kind of a race to the top. So it's like everyone is trying to compete to be the best in class when it comes to sustainability practices. But I also think we also need some time. Some of the stuff we will just do. Some of it we will involve the end consumers. Something needs more to be more mature. I think just the bottle weight. We still have this perception that a good bottle of wine or expensive bottle of wine should be in a heavy bottle for some reason. And I think we also need to give some time for the end consumer to get used to that. However, our research also show that it's also all about different generations. We have new generation coming in that are much more willing to change behavior and also pay a premium to get a more sustainable experience. They have grown up with the notion of climate changes, with the notion of climate biodiversity collapse. So they really want to see a change. And I think there is a big business opportunity to actually give the end consumer an opportunity to act. I think just to open a newspaper or turn on the telly, you will see that there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. And we can see that there's a tendency that products where the end consumer can see we actually doing something to make a better supply chain, to cut emission reductions, they are being rewarded. So I think that may be the next frontier, to have the entire ecosystem to work together on some of these technology. Because I think sustainability has been here for a long time. I think the last 20 years we have been working with sustainability in our own operations. I think now we're really entering a phase where it's the entire ecosystem that is changing. Why I think it's super exciting to be that distributor between producers and the customers and end consumers. We see ourselves at least as that kind of missing link that can really have some more transformational changes happening. So systemic change again. I think that's where we're looking into. It's not the low-hanging fruits. It's very hard. but it's also where we can really make a difference. I think that's what you're doing in the Sustainable Wine Roundtable. This is where we'll see the new things coming from.
Well, that's a nice segue to sort of our final part of the session, to sort of look at the role of collaboration in sort of enabling this transformational change. Barry, with your experience sort of over the last, I don't want to say how many years, but lots of experience, how do you see collaboration being part of sort of the let's call it the 2030 agenda in terms of, climate action?
Look, I think that's going to be key. And as Johan said at the beginning, the retailer I work for has signed up to science-based targets. And I think what we're talking about doing with SWR is, just compiling, that collective of retailers globally that they've all signed up to the science-based targets, and then to say, to the industry, look, here's effectively, some of the largest opportunities for you to sell wine. We're all in, so we're going to have to deliver this. And then, we've got the EU and governments around the world also looking at how do they hit these targets. So I really feel, as Johan said, this is a real paradigm shift. As a wine industry, we're quite focused on making wine and how great it is. And I think we've really got to start to think in a very different way about how we also deliver these, very important objectives to decarbonize the supply chain. So we're just going to have to think radically differently about how we move wine about. I'm really inspired by what Barclay's saying about how we sell it. We're going to have to get really, really creative about all of these things. And as one of the real key challenges is to explain to the consumers in all of our markets, what is more sustainable. Is it a bag and box or is it a glass bottle? And to create these behavioural changes, I believe the best way we can do that is to collaborate, both as retailers, for example, globally, and with producers around the world, to say, look, we've all had a look at this and we think that bulk shipment is a great way to decarbonise, or we think bag and box is a great way. How do we all work together to make sure that more of our consumers buy a bag and box if we feel that's the answer? So I think collaboration is going to be absolutely imperative for us to hit the achievements that we've all set.
Simon, at the Wine Society, you've been doing a huge amount of engagement, and over the last 2 years, I think, alongside the development of the roundtable, you've put sustainability front and centre of your communications. How is that sort of being perceived by your customers, and what other activities are you doing to sort of engage in the topic?
So we've put a very big focus on it. We've published our carbon footprint report, as I mentioned earlier, in 2022, and we now release an annual sustainability report as well, which details all of our actions. And that covers not just sort of climate, although that's obviously a central piece of it, but it talks about biodiversity. We talk about sort of regenerative viticulture, how we can work with our producers to be more sustainable in their vineyards, but also the kind of the social side as well. So there's lots of different sort of pillars to what we're working on, and it's important that they obviously are all joined up. We're quite fortunate in that as a member organisation, we are sort of indulged by our members, if you like, in terms that we can have quite long conversations with them. So it's not that they're just popping into a supermarket to pick something up off the shelf. We can actually try and explain what we're doing and what the benefits are for them and for the wider environment or whatever. So that's a very fortunate position for us to be in, and we do try and make the most of that opportunity to explain some of these actions and explain some of the challenges. Because as has been mentioned, none of this is easy. It's very complicated and it's very, very nuanced. So we're trying to get that message across as clearly as we can do, and we'll continue to do so. I think, as Barry was saying, it's really important that there's a sort of consistent message to consumers around some of these topics. And I think we can all work very well together through something like the Sustainable Wine Roundtable to make sure that those messages are consistent. And I think it's safe to say that Barry and I think, share some of the same customers as well. We're in a sort of similar part of the UK wine market. So if our messaging around, for example, bag in box or bulk shipping is consistent, I think there's a real chance we're going to get some kind of cut through there. Where the roundtable is really important for us is around some of the areas where we don't have that power, that voice. So, for example, shipping. We're relatively small in terms of volume, so it's important that we are part of I think a larger voice around the kind of the changes that we need to see in terms of shipping as well. So collaboration absolutely vital for us there.
Sorry, Tom, could I just add one point that I didn't
absolutely.
add, which is I think what we're talking with Simon and myself, and when you speak to people from other markets, is even as retailers, there's things that are so important that it's not worth being competitive around. So we have these topics that I think we can agree that are anti-competitive. We just shouldn't compete on them because they're too important. And I think as producers, I reckon that, we'll all kind of hit the same, arrive at the same conclusion, which is we've got to get this done, and it's not worth competing over. We can compete on range and how we present wines and lots of other areas that we can compete on, but this is too important.
One thing I'll just say about collaboration, since I joined Free Flow, and my title is focused on business development, and it's it's much less of a transactional role, and it is a lot about partnerships and really like looking at ecosystem partnerships and just everybody that's in there somewhere, and how you can collaborate in some way or learn from each other at least. I probably waste some time, a few hours a week just with taking calls and meetings that, I'm hoping that there's some ability for us to collaborate down the road. And some of those things, though, really do pay off. And, for instance, like when I first joined, it was, this company that and so they're a reusable, packaging network, and I got involved with them, and I wanted to make sure they knew we existed, and that was my main goal. And then their priorities were different, though. They were all about reusable foodware and making the biggest possible change from single-use packaging and related stuff. So I didn't get a lot of attention in this group, but just because I made that introduction and they knew who I was, then I just got a placement from a friend of a friend that has a huge concert venue. And when they were doing the remodel, she was doing also advocated for reusable foodware, but then also made the introduction to me to install Wine on Tap into it. And it's just those type of things that might not seem like they're leading anywhere at first. They come back down the road and really make a huge impact, I think.
Any comments, Johan?
No, I mean this is right down my alley, and I've seen it in many other industries. I've been so fortunate to work with systemic change in other industries as well, and I think really the notion of a pre-competitive space, it's so important. Again, there is no business for us if we don't change. It's as simple as that. I think what I see is working really well is if you are enough to create a tipping point in the industry, saying, now we just decide to cut down the weight on the bottle, and then it's just how we do it. So we don't compete about it, but we come together and are enough to actually say, let's just do that by tomorrow, and then we continue from there, because we need these kind of incremental changes and step changes in order to counter this we are facing these climate changes, because I think it's so evident that we need to change now and not tomorrow. So I think that's the most important thing. We have an old saying in Denmark, and I guess it's also other places. But if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's not always the fastest way, but it's by far where we need to go now. It's to go together, because we need really to go far.
And you just touched on a really important point, that there's already lots of experience and work done in sustainability outside of wine. And within the roundtable, we're looking to draw upon that experience and those lessons learnt to advance wine's progress on its sustainability journey. For us, it's key to be looking outside of the industry for learnings. We've now reached the time for Q&A, the real Q&A. So I hope you've got some questions for the panel. Otherwise, we will then go to the key takeaways. But any questions for the panel? Yep.
Hi, very interesting. Thanks everyone. I got a question. We haven't talked much about consumers. So a lot of this has been industry driven. And surely one of the big wins would be to get a lot of consumer pull. I just wonder what the experts' view is on that.
Johan?
Yeah, maybe I can just. We made some insights, and I also saw some studies from the US, not specifically on wine, but for the first time, I've been working with sustainability now for 15 years, and I think that question always comes up. When is the pull from consumer coming? That would make the world so much easier, right? Then you have the business model. But I saw it was McKinsey and it was Nielsen IQ, who have been tracking consumer products with a sustainability claim, and they're actually performing 17 points higher than products without a sustainability claim. And that is not in a survey, because I think everyone would say, yeah, I will do X, Y, and Z on the survey, but in the basket, where you can actually see that customers are willing to pay more, and are going for products with a sustainability claim. So that gives me hope that we are now entering that phase together with that paradigm shift that we are part of. But I think there will be a lot of change happening where we don't have the end consumer involved, simply because we need to do it in order to adopt and in order to prevent where the industry is going, because it will be very hard for us to actually make wine in the future if we don't do anything dramatically. So that's my take.
I'll keep mine short because I think this is more retail driven, but I think the greatest example of consumer acceptance of sustainability in the wine on tap space is this group in the US. It's called 60 Vines, and they have 60 wines on tap in each of their restaurants. And if you go to one of them, they only have 8 of them now, and they're opening 7 more next year. But they're always packed, and they always have a really young crowd. They're always promoting their sustainable, initiatives, which includes wine on tap, but it goes beyond that. They've partnered with a kava producer to have net zero carbon emissions through some really actual meaningful offsets as well. But anyways, you go to one of their restaurants, it's packed with young people from the time it opens to it closes. You do see the younger generations responding well to that type of marketing.
I was going to say, Clive, you operate in a retail environment, as I do, and we know, how much time the consumer's got in retail. We've got to get things, important pieces of information like how much does a thing cost, or, is it on promotion? So that's what takes up a lot of our communication space in retail, which does make other things really, really difficult. And as we know, the wine industry, it's a fragmented industry. We're not blessed with, rich margins and a ton of money to communicate important bits of information. So that's also a constraint. And I think I like what Johan said. I do think that some of this is going to come from legislation. Our governments have signed up to, reduce carbon. We're all starting to measure, and you guys will be measuring Scope 3. We're going to come up with a view about how much carbon is embedded there. And it's going to be natural for the government to say, we got to reduce that. How do we do that? And that is, going to come through, I think, some transparent information. So, for example, if you had the carbon, embedded carbon of every single bottle of wine on a shelf, and you walked to the till with all your other products from all the other areas, and that gave you a number, you're, shopping today, Mr. Donaldson was £100, and by the way, your embedded carbon was X. That might start to motivate you in a very transparent way to really think about, what you're spending from a cash point of view and also from an environmental impact point of view. So I think it will come from legislation. We're going to have to push a little bit, and we're going to have to inform. But I think that will come it'll happen across, food and drinks in quite a wholesale way eventually. I hope that happens soon, and we kind of put the foot in the accelerator with that, but I would love us to do that. But I think the other bits that we can do in the interim, which is collaborate as retailers. So if, for example, we had a bag-in-box day and we all went on the 5th of March, we're all going to sell bag-in-box and talk about bag-in-box. I think, we're going to have to collaborate to try and communicate some little nuggets of information to our customers that are going to really make a difference.
I think we have time for one more question. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that is fascinating, though, the printing up the totals of your carbon emissions for checking out.
Actually, in Denmark, the government is now looking into climate labeling on the shelf. Like with, from in the EU, we have this with household appliance, the ABCD rating. And in the EU in 2016, they started the Product Environmental Footprint Project, the PEF, which is kind of the same thinking. So from what I hear in Brussels is they want to make it easy for the end consumer. And I think we need convenience and it needs to be easy. I mean, I woke up this morning and I needed to go and order a cup of coffee. How many choices I should take? Should it be a cappuccino, a flat white, or blah, 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 blah? I think there are limits to how much we can ask the end consumer. And we need to make it convenient, but still we need to make it with data that are reliable. And I think that's the balance we need to hit, because we also have the greenwashing monster, and there's a green claim directive coming, which is kind of setting us back a little bit. But I think it's definitely realistic, especially because we are so good at measuring stuff now. I think previously we also touched upon what would be required in the future. I think for everyone producing, get your data right. Make sure that you can give us product specific emission factors, because that will where what we see retailers are starting the most advanced start asking us, because they want to give a better option or an alternative to the end consumer, and it needs to be data driven.
I'd love to just add one point. As bulk producers, I think we're probably going to be more exposed, if you like, to the demand for information, because we're going to get involved with bulk shipment because we're interested in reducing our carbon footprint. And I read a really lovely quote that, in the 80s and 90s, there was a real focus on, quality and safety around things like IFS and BRC, and that was quite a big investment from the industry, and there really wasn't a big upside apart from proving that you're doing a good job and you're doing it safely. Whereas when you start to look at your carbon footprint, there's a couple of great quotes that it's a proxy for production efficiency, and that does have upside. You save costs and you reduce waste. So that, for all of us, that has commercial benefit to understand that. And also, as I say, bulk shipment is going to be one of the first places that we're going to start to say, like, I'd like to see your carbon footprint in production of your wines.
We'll leave it there, but thank you everyone for your engagement.